Welcome back, everybody. We've got one for you here that we've promised you, and it is what gun to buy as your first firearm. You've seen me go in a store and actually purchase a firearm. I've even bought one online, and we've already mentioned to you that we feel the best first firearm is a 9mm handgun. But as you've probably seen from some of those previous videos or in your own searches online, there is so much variety and there are so many different kinds of even just pistols that it can be pretty overwhelming and pretty tricky to figure out what exactly you need. So that's what we're gonna go into here right now. I'm Jimmy, this is New to Guns. Let's talk about guns. Now this part here is really tricky because we have so many friends in the industry who make fantastic firearms, but if I were to go through and show you every single firearm from every single manufacturer that's one that we would recommend, it would be just as overwhelming as you've already seen when you've been scrolling around online or just making your initial searches. These few pistols that I have here on the table are great examples in and of themselves as excellent first pistols. You could just head to the store, buy them, and go right away. What I'm gonna go for most of all here though is the features that make them great first pistols. And you can find some of these features from other manufacturers in their specific pistols, but these are just great examples to kind of use as a benchmark. If you're following along as I go through these guns, I'm just gonna give you the model designations of the ones I'm talking about so you can check them out later on. The one in front of me is the gun that I actually bought in the gun store in one of our other videos. Its name is a bit of a mouthful. It is a Smith & Wesson M&P M2.0 9mm with a 5-inch barrel. This is a core model, so it is optics ready to accept a red dot.
Wow, that's a mouthful.
The one right here you see is a Glock 17 Gen 5. And this is a MOS model. That is Glock's designation for being optics ready, like you see here, just like the Smith & Wesson was. The one that I have over here is a Glock 19. This one is a Gen 4, so it's a little bit older than the Gen 5 model, still perfectly good. It is also an MOS. Just like all of these, it is optics compatible. Being a Glock 19, we'll go into this. It is a slightly different size than the Glock 17 that I held up earlier. That's a key attribute that we're gonna talk about. One of the big key attributes that all these firearms possess is the fact that they are all polymer framed pistols. Now, I'm gonna go through a quick disassembly process with this Smith & Wesson just to show you what I'm talking about here. It is indeed empty, so I'm gonna flip this lever down. It actually involves pulling the trigger to pull the slide off. This right here is the frame, technically the firearm actually, and it is made of polymer, which is a fancy name for plastic, but it is very durable. And what this gives you is a lightweight, relatively inexpensive, and plenty reliable base for the firearm itself. Alternatively, you may see some guns out there, like the old venerable 1911 that I'm holding here, that are steel framed or some sort of metal frame. Often this is more expensive and it's quite a lot heavier. We don't really need something like this. We can get by just fine with a polymer frame. Another feature that these pistols share is the fact that they're chambered in 9mm.
9mm?
That's the type of ammo we'll be buying and shooting out of these pistols. It is ubiquitous, it is easy to find in nearly any gun store. Supply and demand may change that at times, but I wouldn't worry about some environment where ammo can be hard to find, because usually if we are in one of those times, everything is hard to find. And the important part is that you have a caliber or a chambering that allows your magazine to fit the most amount of ammo. Larger calibers than 9mm usually take up more space in the magazine, so you can't hold as many rounds of ammunition. The other nice thing about 9mm is that the recoil, or some people may refer to this as kick, but the recoil that you're going to experience with the pistol is going to be less so than larger calibers. So it's easier, more forgiving to shoot. The other thing is, it is going to be less expensive to shoot. We hope you're shooting a fair amount, getting in some training, having some fun at the range, and so you're gonna be able to feed your gun more inexpensively by shooting 9mm. We do understand that a lot of you are looking to get this handgun for self-defense or home defense purposes, and one thing worth mentioning is that with modern ammunition and good self-defensive rounds, the 9mm is a very potent and capable cartridge for those scenarios. Moving on from caliber, let's talk about the size of these pistols. This is a really big one when it comes to first-time gun buyers, especially ones who are looking at handguns. I'm gonna put this Smith & Wesson back together because it's a perfect example of a firearm that is what we would call full size. It has a 5-inch long barrel. It has a full-size grip so I can get a nice purchase on it with my hand, and I can get a good grip on it with my support hand as well. We're gonna talk more about grip and some of the shooting dynamics here in future episodes, but just know that a larger size pistol is always going to be easier, more forgiving, and kinder to shoot.
It's science.
This can be a bit counterintuitive. Usually we look at something that is bigger and we think that it's going to be more of a handful, potentially more punishing to shoot, heavier recoil, when in fact the opposite is true. We need to realize that the recoil from the 9mm ammo that we're shooting is actually going to have more gun to move, and therefore the gun won't move as much because it's larger and heavier than it would if it were being shot out of something small like this. Now this right here is a Glock 43X, and it also shoots 9mm, but because the pistol itself is so small, so lightweight, and so compact, it's harder for me to get a full grip on it, so it's gonna be harder to handle, and the lightweight nature of it means that the recoil is gonna push it around a lot more, make it a lot snappier, and it won't be as fun to shoot. Now, small guns like this Glock 43X absolutely have a place in gun culture and potentially even in your arsenal, but probably later on. Since you're a first-time gun buyer, we want you to really like shooting. We want you to have fun shooting and want to shoot more so that you can get better. And you're probably not gonna want to shoot more when you get a few rounds down the pipe with this thing. It's gonna be less than stellar in terms of the enjoyment factor. These guns here are gonna be much more enjoyable to shoot. Now, there are a few different size options that I have here, and in fact one that I'm going to go to right now, which is the Glock 19 Gen 4 that I mentioned earlier. This gun isn't quite as large, and I'll do my best here. Let's see what the cameraman can do in his editing. This gun isn't quite as large, I'll show it like this, as the Smith & Wesson that I bought at the gun store. You can see it's not quite as long, and in fact if we were to hold the grips up to one another, you can see that the grip is just a bit shorter. Now, it is still, though, in my opinion, and in the opinions of many of the instructors around here at Vortex Edge, it's still plenty good in terms of size, that we can control it, that it's not gonna be overwhelming in terms of recoil. And so if this was something you wanted to get because you are really interested in concealing a firearm, this is about as small as we would go for your first pistol. Now, many manufacturers make firearms that are similar to this size. In fact, that 4-inch Smith & Wesson that I just bought in our online gun buying video is gonna be very similar to this Glock 19 here. It's kind of the same case across the board. A lot of manufacturers are gonna have something that mimics that. Just to help you out with some nomenclature, the full-size Smith & Wesson here that I was talking about before, this is what we would call a full-size pistol. And usually that is gonna convey the message as to what you're looking for if you want that larger size. Again, that's gonna be a really, really fun and pleasing gun to shoot. The Glock 19 here is actually what the industry would call a compact pistol. Now, it is not particularly compact, especially now that newer subcompact and even micro 9mm handguns are on the market, like this Glock 43X, but the industry, again, would call that Glock 19 a compact, and we would call this a full size. I've already mentioned this next one a couple times, and I promise it's not just because I work for an optics company. This is actually really important. You want to make sure that the pistol you get is optics ready. A lot of manufacturers are going to have their own unique name for what their optics ready system is called. Glock has, like I mentioned before, the MOS, which is the modular optic system. Smith & Wesson has the core, which stands for something else that I can't remember. But basically the gist is that they have this plate system on top that can be adapted to fit really just about any red dot on the market, even ones that aren't Vortex, but of course you want a Vortex one. Anyway, so that just means that when I get the gun right out of the box, I can mount an optic up to it. If I get a gun that is not optics ready out of the box, sure, I can shoot with the iron sights, but in today's day and age, red dots really are the way to go. And you can always just have the flexibility anyway with the plate system. You can run it without the red dot, but realistically speaking, red dots are going to make shooting so much easier. You don't have to line up a rear iron sight with a front iron sight with your target and be focusing on all kinds of different planes at the same time. With a red dot, you can simply focus right on the target, bring your gun up into view. That red dot is going to be hopefully right where you're looking. Once you get used to it, it does take maybe a little bit of a learning curve, just as any gun would require, but it's going to allow you to pick things up so much more quickly, and you're going to get used to shooting and enjoy shooting a whole lot more. Now let's talk about reliability, because let's face it, when you want these things to go bang, you want them to go bang, and you don't want to have any hiccups or issues along the way. Some of that's going to be related to ammo. Actually, that's a future episode to talk about.
We stick to the plan.
But let's just talk about the guns themselves. The guns represented here on the side of guns that we would recommend are known for being very reliable. They have a proven track record. There are tons of them out there on the market. They're made by reputable manufacturers who have a lot of clout behind them, customer service, all that good stuff. They are really, really good buys. Now, these aren't the only reliable polymer frame 9mm handguns on the market. Like I said, I would love to show you every single one, but that would just be overwhelming. There are plenty, but just know that buying from a reputable manufacturer, one that has had that type of pistol out for quite some time and has had the chance to work out all the bugs, all that good stuff, they have a big R&D engineering team behind them. That's the way to go, again, for your first pistol. If you want to start experimenting and getting into unique things that no one else has and you can't find parts for and you're always being frustrated with because they never quite work and you can't find any information about it on the forums because no one... Anyway, if you want to get into all that, get into that for your subsequent firearms when you are a full-on enthusiast. But otherwise, you're just going to get frustrated. Don't ask me how I know. Trust me. The next one is a little bit awkward to explain to new gun owners. Don't get a manual safety on your polymer frame striker-fired 9mm handgun. I'll explain why. All these handguns on the table and really any modern striker-fired polymer frame 9mm handgun are going to have a slew of internal safeties. That means that the gun, when loaded, will not go off until you want it to go off. What do I mean by you want it to go off? I mean that you have to have made the decision to fire, put your trigger finger on the trigger, and pulled the trigger, defeating this final, I guess you could call it an external safety, which is on the trigger face itself. Now I'm going to ensure that this gun is unloaded. I got no magazine in, nothing in the chamber, all that good stuff. And you'll see now that if I just kind of hold onto the side of the trigger here, the gun won't go off. If it were to go off, you would hear an audible click, which you're about to hear when I actually defeat this little blade safety. This is something that you see quite frequently on these guns. It's like a blade safety here. Once I defeat that and pull the trigger to the rear, that is the sound of the striker going off, and if there were a round in the chamber, then the round would go off and it would exit the barrel. So in order for the gun to go off, you have to do all of those things. I'm not an engineer, nor am I an armor for any one of these companies, so I can't go into exactly how all of the internal safeties work, but I do know, without a doubt, that until you want the gun to go off, it won't. And as long as we're following those 4 firearm safety rules again, then you should never find yourself in an accidental situation where you accidentally make the gun go off. Magazine capacity is another important feature to be aware of when you're buying your first handgun. More rounds in your handgun, more better. That's just a simple equation for you. You'll learn some math today. The more rounds you can fit in the handgun, the better. Now, All of these firearms here on the table in front of me, they are still relatively small, maybe not super long in terms of the grip, especially in the case of this Glock 19, and they don't have all that big of magazines, but because these are double stack magazines, the rounds actually sort of smush on top of one another and get stacked in a double stack manner rather than being a skinny little magazine that stacks all the rounds in a nice, perfect straight line. Therefore, in this Glock 19 magazine, despite not being super big and fitting flush with the bottom of the gun, it actually holds 15 rounds of 9mm ammo. And that's great, whether it's for training or that self-defense scenario, I don't know, anything. Again, more rounds, more better. Not so much the case with the 1911, and I'm gonna bring it back out. I found as many ways to bring the old 1911 out in this video as possible because I do just love to hold it, even though it's not what we recommend for this particular application. But anyway, this has a single stack magazine and it shoots 45 ACP, which is a bigger round. So you're fitting bigger rounds in a much smaller magazine. It can only hold 7. You're gonna be reloading this thing all the time, and it's gonna be a pain on the range, really just anytime you're using the gun. They do make double stack 1911 things or 9mm double stack 2011s they call them, which are a lot like this, and that's cool and all, but again, those guns are really big, they're heavy, they're not that great to concealed carry, they can be finicky, super expensive, all that. Anyway, that's the difference between double stack and single stack magazines. One of the other neat things about these guns, really most polymer frame, striker-fired modern pistols and all that good stuff, especially with Glocks, is the magazine compatibility. So, like I said, with this Glock 19, I have the standard flush fit 15 round magazine that it comes with. Now, if I were wanting to use the slightly longer and bigger 17 round magazine out of a more full-size Glock, that fits right in there as well. It does stick out a little bit, but now I have 17 rounds. Maybe I don't mind that magazine sticking out a little bit. That's something that I can use just fine. Now, how about I want to have 33 rounds or 32 or something along those lines. I know that's about what this is. I can put a big old honkin' stick mag inside this gun and I've got rounds to shoot all day long, or at least for a while on the range.
This little baby uses 9mm hull points, 25 round extendable mags.
And so that's kind of neat. Really, you can use just about any magazine as long as the magazine is the same length or longer than the grip. Do keep in mind, of course, this 15 round magazine is not long enough to engage in the 17s or this full-size Glock space. So that's the only issue, but magazine compatibility is fun. When you buy your new handgun, the way it comes out of the box is gonna be just fine to go and shoot. Granted, do put an optic on it, of course, and there are a few accessories we're gonna go over in another video that we'd recommend you get right out the gate. But you might get bit by the gun enthusiast bug. And then you might want to start getting all kinds of other additional accessories and additional little parts and things to customize this gun exactly the way you want it. That could be holsters, it could be triggers, it could be little magazine release buttons or slides in and of themselves, completely custom made lights, you name it. These guns, and this actually especially, this is why I chose the ones that are on the table. The Smith & Wesson and the Glock are probably the most decked out in terms of available aftermarket parts guns on the market. Everybody makes something for these guns, and therefore that is just a nice thing to know when you get into a particular new firearm. You're not gonna have any trouble finding parts. Last but not least, everyone, get a new gun for your first firearm. Later on, subsequent guns that you get and add to your arsenal, go crazy, get something odd, get something old, unique that no one else has, whatever. But for your first one, just get a new one. You know you're gonna get the latest and greatest model. You know you're gonna be the first owner of that firearm. You don't have to worry about somebody else having messed with it before you. You know you're gonna have a warranty and product support to back it up, all that good stuff. So just get a new one.
Here I come. Oh, here I come. Oh.
Trust me. So there you have it, everyone. I've gone over everything that I can think of in terms of attributes and features about a great first handgun. I've made a ton of mistakes along the way. I've got a lot of guns that, granted, I still haven't sold, but they collect dust in my safe, and some days I look at them And I think, man, I wish I would have just known some of these things right off the bat. So hopefully these helped you. We want to make this as much of a zero assumptions video series as possible. So if you have any questions at all, please keep us honest. Let me know if I used a terminology or phrase that didn't make any sense, or if there's something about guns that you've seen in your searches. You've seen a feature that's listed or something that's described in the description that really isn't jiving with you. You're not sure whether that's something you should want or not. Just let us know in the comments below, and we're always happy to answer those. But otherwise, we'll see you guys on the next video of New to Guns.
Good. Nice. Really nice feel to it. That's really good. Is this thing loaded?
It can be.